Computer. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the podcast this morning. I'm starting a new series interviewing entrepreneurs who've done exciting different things. And I want to introduce you to Ben Rodier, an old friend, but also an entrepreneur who's had quite an exciting business life in the last, 20 years, Ben?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. See you, Paul.
So, yeah, well, thanks for being here. The first question I want to ask you, well, not the first question, the first thing I'd like to talk about, Ben, is maybe tell us a little bit about, um, well, first of all, we met when we were a very corporate enterprise, and then Ben did two sort of startups after that. Maybe tell us a little bit about that, and then I can get in, drill down on my questions.
Absolutely. I'm ready for your tough questions.
Okay.
Yeah, Paul, you and I met, I think it was more like 25 years ago. And I'm not going to say how old you were because then the audience will figure out the math of how old you are today. But we met at a time in our careers where I think we were realizing that, corporate maybe wasn't for me and for you either. And then, the journey kind of took place after that. We were at CanWest, which is now like Shaw and Rogers Communication. We worked in television. And that was really the beginning of my career after university. My background is born and raised Montreal, super proud to be building here, to be working here, as an English and a bilingual Quebecer. It's not always easy to build businesses and to be successful in this part of the world. But, you've been and I've been, and I'm happy to talk about it. But if we go back to, I think it was about 2003, maybe 2005, we were selling ads on global television.
You were
You
10,
were a
I
lot
was
more,
20.
yeah, you were a lot more experienced than I was because you're way older than me.
Here, it's already
And
starting. It's already starting. Ben's been
and
ribbing me about this for 20 years, 25 years. Okay, keep going, buddy.
I mean, I think you left the business probably a year or two before I did,
Yeah.
but I think back then I was in my mid 20s and I was getting married or maybe engaged at the time. And I think that was the beginning of me realizing that working in corporate was not going to, fill my cup. It wasn't
Okay.
going to give me everything I wanted, whether it was the stage of my career and the amount of money that I could make, or just the thing that motivated me as an individual. So I met what would later become my co-founder in future businesses, and he and I built a company that was selling advertising, so very adjacent to my
Yeah.
TV experience. But this company, AdSplash, was effectively figuring out how to sell advertising on e-commerce sites, and no one had done that before. Fast forward to today, retail media networks are a huge industry. And I even say sometimes, timing is half of it, luck is almost the other half. But when you think about the timing of it, nobody was doing it, and the
Yeah.
market was all ours. And I'll
I
never
remember you
forget,
explaining it to me and me going, "Oh, wow."
why
And
didn't I
part of
think of
me was
that?
like, "This is really exciting. It's fun." And the other part of me was like, "Is this really going to work? Is someone going to look
Yeah.
at advertising on someone else's website?" So it was very
So I think
embryonic.
I think that's what motivated me, and that's what kind of lit the spark as a for real entrepreneur
Yeah.
is when you see something that is so obvious as a great idea. Why didn't I think of that? Or how
Yep.
come no one else has thought of that? But you're able to counterbalance it with, I can see how this will work, right?
Yeah.
Advertising on retail websites was something that had never been done before. But Oscar, who was the founder of that company, AdSplash, had figured out ultimately the vision of how to make it happen.
Yeah.
And he brought me in as, number two to operationalize it and figure out based on the realities of like the ad business and trafficking and stuff like that, and
Okay,
how
I
how
gotta stop you
we
there. Honestly, did you have what you needed to know back then, or you had to learn a lot on the job? Like, why did Oscar come to you? Is it because you were friends, or he felt that you really did have
we were
the
we were
knowledge?
we had common contacts. Like we
Yeah.
didn't know each other before we met each other, and I think there was enough of a baseline coming from Ken West and Global
Okay.
Television that on paper I should know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And the truth is even you, like, coming out of Global, like, you knew how the ad business worked.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Maybe you knew more about TV than you did about digital. But during my time at CanWest, like online video was huge, and I
Yeah.
was the young gun who was
So
trying to champion
you
that. So
really had the knowledge and you really did understand
yeah,
what was going on. Okay, I've got to
yeah.
ask you before you move on. Sorry, I'm going to interrupt you. I
Okay.
apologize. Wasn't it scary to think I'm going from corporate where I've got a, solid income to this thing could fail
Yeah.
and dive down and I could be looking for a job in like 3 months.
100%. And again, that is where the entrepreneurial spark got lit in me because, you swallow when you make the decision. It was
Yeah.
actually one of our executives at CanWest who told me back then when I was in my 20s that life is filled with OSMs, oh shit moments, where you make the decision and you step through the doorway, but
Yeah.
then, shit gets very real very quick
Yeah.
and you swallow, you
Yeah.
have butterflies in your stomach. And I actually remember where I was and when it kind of hit me where normally at Can West, when we needed to do XYZ, you would have to go up the chain of command, right?
Yes.
And ask
Yeah.
Toronto or New
Yeah.
York or
Yeah.
whatever
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
approval. And then here we were, like we were selling ads on Walmart and
Yeah.
Best Buy at the time. And there was like a really important decision, whatever it was. And someone had to make the call. And I remember like, oh shit, I'm the person that needs
Yeah.
to make that call now.
Oh
Like
man,
there's
it's
no
me.
approval.
Yeah.
There's no approval to make. Like it's my
Yeah.
ass. And so and then obviously, that business worked out. In a very short amount of time, we gained a lot of traction. The business ended up being acquired by Yellow Pages.
Yeah.
And so that whole experience for me paid off.
Yeah.
But there were definitely moments where it was, the sun was not so bright. And,
Yeah.
there were dark days of trying to figure out how we're going to make it
Now,
work.
did you have a family then, or were you single, or like were you supporting, or were you
I
just starting
was
it?
I was engaged and married and probably, yeah, actually, no. In the first 6 months of leaving Can West, I had Jack. I had my firstborn son.
Okay.
And
Good.
so we bought a house and we had a big mortgage and life was getting very real very
Yeah.
quickly. But again, like the whole thesis behind leaving corporate and joining a startup at an early stage was that there was this arc, there was this concept of I can arc higher
Yeah.
and make more and have
Yeah.
a larger, outweighed
Yeah.
impact in a small pond than I could in a big pond.
Yeah. Yeah. Very interesting. Okay, so that was that first experience, and then you moved on to something else.
Yeah, so Yellow Pages acquired that company, and I was part of a very small group of people who were brought in as part of the acquisition to make it all work. And I actually got a chance to reunite with a lot of people that you and I know from media in
Yeah.
Canada and in Montreal and Quebec. And Mediative was born, and I spent just under 3 years building the acquisition plan into what was later known as Mediative, which was kind of a digital innovation agency for
Yeah.
Yellow Pages. My career was in a great spot. I was, getting more and more responsibility. I was management at in my early 30s for a publicly traded company. But as soon as that earnout hit and, the remaining opportunity was just a regular salary with some bonus attached to it, I remember where I
You
was.
got the itch.
My co-founder, he called me. He's like, "We can't do this anymore. We got to go. Like the next thing is waiting for us,
Yeah. Yeah.
and we're just wasting time here." I
Yeah.
was literally on the first vacation since the whole earnout had happened, but he convinced me to start a company with him that would later become Salesfloor,
Yeah.
and we built that with our own money. We learned the ropes of what it means to build a software company and to really grow a real startup. And the one thing that I learned there was, when you're actually building something, and that's really what got me even more excited, was when you're actually building a product, whether it be software or hardware or whatever, it's really hard. Whereas in media and television and online ads, we just wrote PowerPoint documents, went out and pitched agencies. And so long as the trafficking worked for the advertising,
Yeah.
building a product in advertising back then was really easy.
Yeah.
Now it's obviously a lot more sophisticated,
Yeah.
but back then it was a real shift. So we built Salesfloor, we grew it, like bootstrapped it with our own money, eventually found amazing investors that believed in our vision. That was BDC and White Star and later Level Equity.
Yep.
And the company eventually grew to a point where we were able to sell a nice piece of it to private equity.
Yep.
And everybody in the company, including, engineers and marketing
Yep.
managers, whoever was there at that time, had the opportunity to make some money, pay off debt, pay
Yep.
down mortgages. So that was a great moment.
And how long were you with Mediative?
That was just under 3 years. And then Salesfloor, we built over a 10-year period. Salesfloor
Yeah.
still operates today.
And how long
And
were you with
uh,
Salesforce?
what's that?
How long were you with Salesforce?
10 years.
And when and why did you leave Salesforce?
So I was approached. I never thought after we made the deal with our private equity owners that bought a portion of the company. I never thought I would leave. I thought I would
Yeah.
just stay and continue to grow the company, which I did for 3 years after the private equity deal. But I was approached by a group in California who were basically incubating a concept that was very similar to Salesfloor, which was, a sales technology platform. This sales technology platform was very different. Nothing anybody had ever done before, focused on helping salespeople achieve their maximum potential by leveraging everything AI has to offer. And they had proved out a very small test with a significant retailer in the US and in Canada. And as I saw this grow over the few months, just being an advisor and watching from the sidelines, it clicked for me that the next adventure could be, taking on what would later become FrontlineIQ
Yeah.
and turning it into the world's first AI sales coach for in-person sales teams.
Okay.
And that's what I did last year. I replaced myself at Salesfloor after 10 years. My co-founder and I, are still on amazing terms. I help him and the board and the company in every way that I can. I'm still a shareholder,
Yeah.
but I think despite how challenging it was personally for me to get over the hump of deciding to do something new, I think the most important thing that I got out of that experience was how to split ways or how to go on to the next thing the right way without
Yeah.
burning people and without leaving people high and dry.
That's a big thing, Ben, because there's not many there's not many textbooks or coaching that's done to show you how to part ways and move on to something else. So
Definitely,
that's we could probably have a whole podcast episode on that. But listen,
for sure.
I have my 7 questions that I told you about, and I want to get into them.
Sure.
Um, and one of the reasons that you're on this podcast is because you took those risks, right? And I know we've talked for, been talking obviously all these years, we've stayed in contact. And I remember there's a few times where I remember going to lunch with you and you were stressed out, and you were genuinely stressed out. So it's not like it's always, oh, this is great, everything's going. There are, when you jump into the entrepreneurial game, there are moments where you're pulling your hair out at 4 in the morning, wondering why the hell did I do this, right? I should have just
Yeah,
stayed
for
with the
sure.
stable thing. And that I have a lot of
You
respect
know,
for because I think you did it even in a more scary way than I did. Were you gonna say?
Yeah, look, I think taking the leap, whatever that leap is for you or for
Yeah,
me, it's always that OSM, right? That oh shit moment. Like, what am I really doing here? And I think, when you really boil it down, like there's never a moment where you could look at it and say, like, okay, now and forever, this was the right decision.
yes,
There's always going to be hills and valleys of, how you feel about what you've done or what you're doing. And, to use the example that you just gave when we were at lunch, I think you really find out how resilient you are when, it's a Tuesday morning randomly and you're going for lunch with Paul this afternoon, but at 10:45 or 11 something right before lunch, you get really bad news.
yeah,
Someone you were counting on is quitting, or a customer that you were counting on that revenue is terminating a contract, or
yeah. It represents
something that really
25% of
hits
your
you.
revenue. Yeah,
Exactly, like
yeah,
something that hits you in your belly,
yeah,
like I would say that's the one thing as an entrepreneur that you need, like everyone should become conditioned
yeah,
around, which is the pain. The CEO of NVIDIA had a video a few months ago talking to a university audience saying, I wish you all hardship and pain because that pain creates the toughness and the resilience.
yeah,
And I think you find out who you are when you go for lunch with Paul at 12 o'clock and 25 minutes ago, you found out that 20% of your revenue is at risk, or that person that you were counting on
Yeah.
is out the door. And you need to find a way to not completely ruin lunch, but at the same time, balance all of that craziness going on between your
Yeah.
ears.
And Ben didn't ruin lunch, by the way. He did express what was going on, but he didn't ruin lunch. We
That
still,
was probably one of the ones where you paid.
yes, I think that one you made me pick up the tab. So on that note, Ben, my first question, we talked about this, but maybe talk to us about a business failure that occurred and what did you learn from it? One you want to share with us that you think is good for this storyline of our podcast.
I think one of the big failures we had in the last company at Salesfloor was some of our earliest customers were just they were the wrong fit.
Mm,
And we had a running joke that, we were building a sales application for salespeople to use that would allow them to engage customers wherever they are,
mhm.
online, in store, text message, email, video chat. And Salesforce became a market leader in this. But the very, very early days when we were really creating the market for this kind of technology that didn't exist, um, my co-founder and I had a running joke where before we had our first customers, we'll test with a dépanneur, with
Yeah,
a corner store.
yeah.
We'll
A
take anything you got.
7-Eleven.
And exactly.
Yeah,
So, in that spirit and those early awkward, unclear stages of a new business, um, it's very dangerous what you say yes to.
yeah,
And I remember there was one customer, which I'm not going to say the name because it wouldn't be right, but there was one customer that was way outside of our core,
yeah,
ICP, ideal customer profile that we really tried to make it work. And I was the customer and operations person at the early stages of that business. And I remember for like 4, 5, 6 months, we tried to make it work. We banged our head against the wall.
yeah,
And lo and behold, at the end of the term of that pilot or that test, they're like, no, this is not working.
yeah.
And I agree, like in my mind, I'm like, I agree
You
with
had to
them.
agree. Right.
But inevitably, I was so pot committed to making it work because it was like the only thing that we
Yeah.
had at the time. But it was a massive failure. And we learned from our failure that if it looks like shit, it probably or could be shit.
If it looks
So
like shit, smells like shit, tastes like shit, it's
it
probably
probably is shit.
shit.
Now, entrepreneurs are great at turning, and I think you know who said this to us, turning dog shit into dog food, right?
Yes.
There are
Yeah.
scenarios like that, but I think with experience comes the ability to understand the dog poop that you want to stay away from the onset. Being able to say no
Yeah.
is the learning that you get
Yeah.
from these failures.
Yeah. But it's interesting. Wouldn't you say though that when you started or when you took on those first clients that weren't the right fit, did you really know they weren't the right fit already?
I think it was 50% confidence that it was not the right fit,
Okay. All
and
right. So you knew,
50%
but you
hope
said
that we
we
get
have to
lucky.
do it. We just had, yeah, and you were
By the
learning.
way,
Yeah. Yeah.
sometimes you get lucky, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes something that looks like dog poop turns into, gold and
Yeah.
a new use case or a new use for
Yeah.
the tool that opens up a whole new opportunity.
So
So
it was a risk 50-50. It went south, but on others, I guess you took the risk and it went the right way.
yeah,
So
exactly.
so so basically what you're saying is you'd probably do the same thing again, right?
Yeah, I think I've become better at understanding
Assessing.
the what's in front of you and being able to say this is not going to work. Let's
Okay.
let's dump it. Let's move on.
Okay. All right. Okay, question number two. Thank you, Ben. That was very good. Um, if I had to ask you, and when I say this, you have your entrepreneurial hat on or your risk taker entrepreneurial hat on. Why do you do what you do? Why is Ben motivated by this type of business? And I know you've done well. You earned some coin, but you know it can't just be that because you could have gone into finance and worked for some big finance company and probably make 10 times what you make now, working for some big firm in New York doing deals, whatever. But why do you do what you do?
Yeah, I think when it comes down to it, now I can tell you, we're doing this interview in 2025, and I've done the entrepreneur thing now for, 13, 14 years. I can safely say that the building part of creating something from nothing and
Hmm.
being able to identify an opportunity and build for the opportunity, that's the exciting part. When you
Okay.
validate what is literally something that doesn't exist, and you can actually create not only the plan to build a product for
Yeah.
that opportunity, but how you monetize it, how you market it, how
Yeah.
you hire for it. Like all of that is incredibly rewarding
Yeah.
when you're in these early stages of building a business.
Yeah.
But I have to like I'll be very honest with you, as like you call it entrepreneurship, but my experience over the last 15 or 20 years literally went from, I knew entrepreneur stuff was exciting and I always dabbled in it. But
Yeah.
when I was at, Global with you, my first move into entrepreneurship wasn't starting a company. It was joining an early stage company.
Ah,
And
okay.
then we made that work. And then the
Yeah.
next one
Yeah.
was starting a company myself, but with a
Yeah.
co-founder who had done it before.
Yeah.
And now the next one is let's start a company on my own with partners in California who have incredible experience and
Yeah.
resources. But the journey has been kind of leaning heavier and heavier on those early stages of building as I
Yes.
went on. And now that I'm at the stage where I'm actually building from scratch on my own as the CEO, it's I know this is where I belong,
So the
right? And not
creative
everybody
aspect, the
realizes that.
building, yeah. But there's one thing that you haven't mentioned that I think I think maybe I'm wrong, but I get a feeling you get a little bit of a high too from when you're closing business, when you're doing
Of
that
course.
business development and that customer comes on and you're able to help them. I think you enjoy that. Am I right?
It's what validates the vision that you have as someone who sees the opportunity and builds for it, right? If you get a customer that signs a contract, and I was really fortunate in Frontline IQ, we've only been this product has been around only for about 18 months, and
Yeah.
we've really only been selling it for less than a year. And within like I think it was 44 days was the number when we got our first signed contract that was real revenue from a customer. When you get that DocuSign in your inbox, it's really weird when you work from home because you want to turn around and ring a
Yeah,
bell
yeah,
and
yeah.
go grab a beer with
Yeah,
everybody. But
yeah.
when you're working from home, especially at the early stages,
Yeah.
you have to kind of step back from your computer for a second and say, okay,
Yeah.
this is
I did
this is
good. I
something.
did good. Jump up and
Yeah,
down a little bit.
yeah,
Yeah. Well, you're allowed to have a beer. You still have a
yeah,
beer, but
yeah.
depends if your wife likes to have a beer. Okay, so thanks. I think that you answered my question number two. On to question number three. Um, what would you say are your values as an entrepreneur? What defines Ben? I know it's a tough question, but if I asked you, what are the values you believe in? What drives you in your relationships, in your communication, in what your clients should expect of you and what you expect of them?
Uh, I think values evolve, especially in an early stage company. But if you're asking me personally,
Yeah.
like what values I bring to
Yep.
to work, I think hard work, no shortcuts. You got to put in the sweat, which is, sometimes you get sweat equity. They call it that for a
Yeah.
reason. Um, and the resilience that comes with not taking no for a failure or coming back. I always used to say with our team at Salesfloor, we faced real headwinds when it came to introducing what we were doing to certain companies because they'd never equipped salespeople with digital tools to serve an online customer. Like it was all
Yeah.
very new
Yeah.
when we were growing into our market. And sometimes people said no or, terminated a contract. And I always thought that like, okay, this hurts. Like you take it in the chest. Everybody should learn from their mistakes, but that's not what it's about. It's about how hard you bounce off of that wall, right?
Okay.
You're gonna get pushed down and pushed up against the wall when you start a company and you build a product, but it's never, and I mean never, about what what does this failure mean? And it's everything about how do you respond to it
Okay.
and change, pivot, react, come back, overcome obstacles. Like
Yeah.
that's what it's all about. And I think,
And if I go a little deeper and I ask you, because this is very much, you're giving the perspective of someone who's working really hard to build something new. But let's say once you have those first clients, what should they expect from you? What do they get in return from dealing with the company that you're part of? What is
same
it?
thing, hard work, no shortcuts.
Okay.
And that should resonate in how we run the
Okay.
business. So
Okay.
I'm
And when
I've
you say
grown
no
up in
shortcuts, do you mean no excuses? You mean
yeah,
bare
so
honesty?
everything that
Take
we every
responsibility for the stuff that might go wrong? Yeah.
I think accountability for what you sell is really what no shortcuts hard work means.
Okay.
If I tell you I'm going to sell you something and it's going to help you increase your sales, everything that we do at Frontline IQ and in the last few businesses has always been against objectives and numbers. It's not rocket science. We read
Okay.
books about OKRs, objectives and key
Yeah.
results and rocks and pebbles and all
Yeah.
of that stuff is there because it works and it
Yeah.
works for thousands of businesses. And if you're
Yeah.
diligent and you say, okay, we're going to increase your sales by how much?
Yeah.
Hey, Paul, would 5% be good?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, good. So now you're buying something from me that's going to increase your sale by 5%. I owe you as your vendor that 5% and no shortcuts, hard work
Yeah.
is what's going to get us. Because sometimes, especially in software, there's a lot of criticism of software salespeople that a lot of people go out there and they make big promises and then it
Yeah.
fizzles out. I think that's where rubber meets the road for me.
Yeah.
If we're selling a sales enablement technology that's going to increase your sales, I just did this yesterday. We looked not at our data because our data looks great. They're
Yeah.
using the app,
Yeah.
80% weekly active
Yeah.
usage.
Yeah.
Everybody's got, the metrics that they
Yeah.
need to show
Yeah.
that it's being used, but is it moving the needle? So
Is
we
it
took our
helping them?
customer,
Yeah.
yeah, so we took our customers' data and said, okay, everybody using the app, how are they doing?
Yeah.
Okay, here's the percentage growth year over
Yeah.
year. And then we looked at everybody else that's not using it and said, what's their
Uh,
growth? And if we could show that
yeah.
5% in your case difference, then we're doing our job,
Okay.
right?
Oh, cool. So I like that. So it's funny because you talk about those values and really they're values that have existed for, hundreds of years for entrepreneurs or thousands of years for people who really want to deliver something that works and
No
and
shortcuts.
move forward. It's funny because sometimes I talk to people in, big, you've probably seen this too, big corporations and they talk about values and they're very different, right? They talk about respect because they're not in, let's say, a sales perspective. So they talk more about respect and growth
Integrity.
and so integrity, which are all important things. But if you don't have that in a startup and your clients can walk away, if you don't have integrity, respect, accountability, like your client can, flip the bird pretty quickly and turn
Yeah.
around. So that's interesting. Um, would you say, of all the places you worked in, and this is a tough one, would you say that your values always aligned with the enterprises that you worked with or for or earned or owned?
I think so.
Yeah.
I think, going back to the resilience of what it means to be someone who likes to build things, you find common ground wherever you are. And if you can't find that common ground, then you should leave because
Yeah.
it's unhealthy. But like Yellow Pages is a great example of probably the one place that I spent a few years at. Now, it was because of an acquisition. I didn't
Yeah.
choose Yellow Pages,
Yeah.
but
You were
we did
brought in.
choose
Yeah.
we chose to say yes to
Yeah.
them buying the company. And because of that, I was now a Yellow Pages employee, and I needed to find things that resonated with me within Yellow Pages. Now,
Yeah.
Yellow Pages, the big printed book that goes on your doorstep,
Yeah.
that wasn't the product or the line of
Yeah.
business that we were anywhere close to. We were the digital answer to that problem, and that fired me up. We were
Yeah.
building something to basically, leverage all the data that Yellow
Yeah.
Pages had for the future of digital advertising. And I was excited to be a part of that story. But after the earnout and the mediative thing kind of fizzled out, it was a very natural reaction for me to come back to
Yes.
building a company.
Yeah. Yeah. Very true. Does that big yellow book still exist?
I think so, and especially
Really?
the one thing I remember when the transaction finished up is we were blown away at the kind of data that Yellow
Came
Pages
from that.
actually
Yeah.
had. You know,
Yeah.
they could tell you when the most amount of phone calls happened for pizza
Yep.
places at the time,
Yeah.
day, hour.
Yeah.
So that kind of
That's
consumer
cool.
information was super
Yeah.
interesting. But in terms of the Yellow Book, I think other than like remote markets that don't have access to great internet, I think that ship has sailed.
Yeah. I think of old phone books with that book in there, the white pages and then the yellow pages. Okay, I'm
Yeah,
sorry. Keep going.
exactly.
But I was so young then, I barely remember. Okay, question number four.
Yeah.
This is one of my favorite questions, but maybe hard to answer in a way. Tell me about when I say tell me about a strange business experience you can share. And what I mean by that is something that maybe was very unexpected or odd or, just a good story.
I think COVID, like the pandemic and
Yeah,
everybody, shifting to work from home, it created, I think everybody who owns companies and had to deal with HR and
yeah.
equipment and Zoom, I think everybody has crazy stories over those 2 years.
Okay, so tell
I
me
think
one.
so. Number one, I remember going on walks with my partner, not knowing if we were going to survive the month or the quarter,
Ah, okay.
followed by the next day, kind of doing a 180 and realizing we might be in an amazing position to actually grow this
Okay.
business triple because of the way people are shopping, buying,
Okay.
and all of that. So, that gave birth to, okay, we're going to make this work from home pandemic thing have to work.
So from
When people
doom to
work from home,
bloom.
yeah, when people worked from home for 2 years, I think we all saw the everybody's got wild stories. My
Yeah.
wild story is that we quickly realized that people were starting to relocate themselves to
Yeah.
remote markets. We had employees of all different cultures and
Uh-huh.
nationalities. And, I remember this one particular employee put in a request for a vacation, and they were following the rules, asking their manager, whatever it was, 2, 3 weeks lead time for the vacation. But they requested like 5 or 6 weeks. They wanted to take like a month and a half off.
Okay.
And so the manager went back and said, like, why do you want to take a month and a half off? Like, we have a business to
Yeah.
build. And they said, well, I need to go home to my family because I haven't seen them. The pandemic has
Yeah.
shut travel off, so I want to go there. And it was a far off country.
Yeah.
And so rightly so, the manager came to the executive team and said, this is the situation. And we had policies in place in
Yeah.
terms of relocation and all that. And so we came to a compromise and we said, look, 2, 3 weeks, no problem. But in terms of like working from that location, the time zone was
Yeah.
inverted. That person would have to like work through the night and sleep during the day. So we said no to that, and we said take your vacation, be with your family.
Yeah.
So the employee says, "Okay, thank you." Takes 10 days off, comes back from vacation. And I don't know if you know this, but in Slack, it displays your location. The
Aha.
employee decided to not tell anyone, get on a plane, go halfway around the world, and pretend like no one was going to find out. And we
Okay.
found out, and we had to deal with it. But there's this story exists in many, many companies during the
Yeah.
pandemic. But the weirdness of it was that it literally created a culture of employees versus employers
Yeah.
that took a long time to go away. And
To
that
settle. Yeah.
particular that particular situation really, really buzzed me because it was full on deceit. It was full on lying,
Mm.
but it was physical lying. It was like going to
Yeah.
another continent.
Yeah. Yeah. And did you have to terminate the person or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we
Interesting.
waited until the person came back, and
And then yeah.
HR was involved at that
Yeah. Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
We were big enough that we
Yeah,
had an
because
HR
you're
team.
right. You're lying. Yeah. So yeah, that is kind of strange. And you're right. COVID created a bunch of
Everything came out of the
weird
woodwork.
situations.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
yeah. And
The concept of virtual sexual harassment became a real thing.
oh my God. Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah. That's I hadn't thought of that, but yes, that's kind of strange. Okay, thank you. Good answer. Okay, number five. Five. Um, what would you say? I love this question too. I wrote them. I love them. What would you say to your 20-year-old self as far as as what the future is going to, not what the future is going to bring, but what advice would you say to your 20-year-old self?
Spend more time with Paula Fleur.
Brown noser.
Don't wait. I
Yeah.
think back then, I was way more risk averse and
Oh, okay.
conservative
Okay.
regarding how I'm going to grow as, a professional in business.
Okay.
And the pragmatic approach to get a job out of university, climb the ladder, move into another job, take a risk on an early stage startup. I wish I did all that twice as fast because all the cliches are true. When you don't have children, when you don't have a significant other or a
Mm,
mortgage, you can take those risks.
yeah.
You can do things that put you on a higher arc than you would have waiting
Yeah.
for the raise or the
Yeah.
promotion or whatever gets you to that next stage. So if you track my journey, it was corporate, it was join early stage, it was start a company with
Yeah.
someone, and then it was start a company on
Yeah.
your own. I wish I could condense that and make it
Yeah.
all happen in 5 years instead of 20 years.
Now, are you saying this to your kids?
I am. I
Yeah.
am. My
Okay.
my my kids are amazing because they do have they I don't know if it's because of the DNA that I share with them, but
Yeah,
they
we'll
do
say that's the
have
reason.
yeah, they have a desire to work at a very young age, and
Oh,
I
good.
love that. And I think there's a careful balance to strike with like the desire to make money while learning things and
Mm,
finding out what makes you happy at the same
yeah.
time. The last thing that I want to do is say you should be an entrepreneur or else everything else
Yeah.
sucks because
Yeah.
that's not right for everyone.
Yeah.
So I'm definitely supportive of it.
Okay. And sorry, sideline 4.5. Do you think that because in a way it's a bit of a lack of confidence, right? That I think you and I both had that we felt we need to go corporate. But yes, I'm older than you, but also when I graduated university, it was like, well, you got to go get a job, work for corporate. Like the idea of being entrepreneur right away was foreign. I mean, I've got a few friends who did it, and I think it was the same thing for you. So do you think that the conversations you now have with your children are about having confidence to believe in what you want to do, or are they more about following a certain path?
I don't think it's about following a certain path. I
Okay.
think, my kids are between the ages of 9 and 15 right now. Jack
Yeah.
actually turned 15 yesterday. And it's not about here's the path. It's
Okay.
it's more about learn as much as you can to figure out what makes you happy. At
Okay.
this age, they
Okay.
still have a bunch of years ahead of them
Yes.
before they
Yes.
need to make
Yeah.
those decisions. But let's be really clear. Being an entrepreneur at 20 or 25 years old means that you are not getting in on the ground floor of a company that's going to potentially take care of you, give you a pension,
Yeah.
give
Yeah.
you stock options,
Yeah.
and all of that
Yeah.
compounds over time. My personal opinion is less and less companies are built to sustain someone's career over that period of
Yes.
time anymore. But back then, that was that like that's what we gave up when we
Yep.
left global
Yep.
and we said we're going to work for small early startup companies. We gave up the idea that at 65, 7 years old, on top of your government
Yep.
pension, you're going to have something from your company.
I
And
left
you know,
CBC in 1993, right? So
exactly
if I'd stayed at CBC, I'd probably be, no offense
retired
to people who
now.
stayed there, I'd be retired now. I would have gone crazy. It wasn't the right place for me, but I would have this huge pension fund and I could probably just retire. So you're right. You've got to see. So I guess what am I wrong in saying what you're saying is they have to make their own path, make their own decision, discover what's right for them, and have the
Yeah,
confidence to do what they need to do and want to do.
100%. And
Okay.
and that could mean doing a job in a company that may not pay you an enormous amount of money, but if it makes you happy, who are we as parents to stand in the way of that?
Yeah.
We just need to, my personal opinion is our job as an usher is to show them all the seats in the theater that are available to them, and
Yeah.
which one they choose to sit in is really up to them eventually.
Yeah. I said 4.5 before. It was actually 5.5 because now we're at six.
Okay.
And number six is I want to, and I don't know, this is a big topic that everyone talks about and everyone's got an opinion. Everyone's got strong opinions, but I want to hear yours within the the confines of your reality. And it's AI. I want to know how you see AI affecting what you do currently. And you must think about this. Everyone does. Um, how do you see it? Tell me a little bit about that. Like, how will AI affect the company you are currently working to build?
So we have an AI product.
Okay.
It's not just it doesn't just use AI or it's not AI powered. The AI is part of what the product actually does by analyzing data and analyzing real conversations between
Okay.
salespeople. So AI is really embedded in the actual foundation of what we do. So part of the reason why I'm so excited about what we're building at Frontline IQ is that the timing of AI's ability to massively impact in a positive way people's lives, it's moving so quickly with such mass acceptance that it's just an incredible tidal wave of tailwind.
Okay.
Regardless of what our product actually does, everyone is looking for how AI can improve their lives. So from a company perspective, there's a very high bar and a very high set of expectations that whatever you do in our company, you are using every shape or form of technology, including AI, to accelerate and aggressively hit your objectives,
Okay.
goals, deliverables, whatever it is. And we have very specific expectations around what that means for engineering, for
Yep.
marketing, and I think that's where companies are succeeding is that they're creating the box of minimum good best practices for AI in different areas of work. At the same time, if you look at, you know, in your personal life, how you use, AI assistants and agents, I think what we're seeing today, like we're talking, at the end of the summer of 2025, I think what you're seeing with AI is it's separating society from those that are embracing it from those that are
Yeah.
not. And what it's going to do, especially for the next generation of workers like our kids, is it's going to create the have and the have-nots. And the ones that are equipped to do all of the amazing things at a speed and momentum that AI technology will help them do that, they're going to be at a huge advantage. And the ones that aren't paying attention to it, are the ones that are really going to be at a disadvantage and be limited in their choice in what they do from a work and from a business perspective. So I think more and more now, we need to put pressure on our schools to make this part of the curriculum,
Mm.
not just as a cool, what is it called? Workshop once a quarter, but actually part of the day in, day out of course curriculum so that our kids are leaving high school and college and university with the tools they need to compete
Yeah.
because it's fierce now.
Yeah. So so if I was to summarize a few of the points you make, because you made a lot of points there, you see AI as a tool to benefit currently what you're doing in your enterprise that can really maximize your customer experience in using the tool that you're selling at different levels, like you said, operations, engineering, even for sales. And what you're saying, as far as the next generation is concerned, is learn to properly use AI in your life so that it can maximize and be an add-on to what you do rather than being an adversary. Because a lot of people
Yeah.
speak of AI as an adversary, and I'm kind of with you. I think that's a bit of a mistake. You have to embrace it, and there's so much positive potential with anything that brings so much potential. Of course, there's negative potential, but in reality, if you don't adopt it, then, like you said, you're just left behind in the dust.
Yeah, I think the
Unless you choose to be, an organic farmer on his
yeah,
own, and
exactly.
that's okay, right? But
But
that's
that's the limited choice that
yeah,
I mean that
yeah.
if you choose to say this isn't for me, then I think if you go back 20 or 30 years from now, this is like someone saying, I think this computer thing or I think this internet thing, it's not for me.
I remember hearing that, Ben. I don't need that computer thing on my desk. I can just use the phone and my pad.
Exactly.
Okay. All right,
Exactly.
that's good. Well, thanks. And I don't want to talk too much about AI just because there's so many conversations out there, and I really want it, and I'm happy you really you addressed it in a very specific manner. So that's good. Okay, seven, my last question to you. Um, and it totally veers off. Do you have a hero? Is there someone, and if you say me, I'm gonna punch you in the head next time I see you. Do you have a hero?
Okay.
Um, and and if you do, like, is it a business hero? Is it someone in school that really motivated you? Is it someone who helped shape you? Who, why, and if you and yeah, tell me about it. And maybe you don't have a hero. It's fine.
I have trouble like, naming a hero, especially from
Okay.
a business perspective.
Okay. So people who've
Uh,
influenced you, then someone
yeah,
who's
no, but
motivated
I do have someone that I
you. Good.
think, I can answer the question with. Part of the problem of naming a hero in business is that you don't know what that person is going to do and what you're going to see that person do in the future. And
Yeah, 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 yeah. Or someone who's
but
influenced you so far. Let's say we'll cut it at what they've
look, I
done
think
so far.
I can answer the question in two parts. Uh, Framing who I am and what I've become, it comes from my parents,
Okay.
my family. You know, we didn't have a lot, but we had enough, growing up. And I learned from my parents how to build a family
Okay.
and what it looks like to be, in business, both successfully along with failures.
Yeah.
But my family, especially my parents, formed for me what good looks like. What good
Yeah.
looks like in terms of relationships, in terms of working hard, no shortcuts. So all of that I credit to both my mom and my dad. And then later in life,
Oh,
obviously the
you're gonna
the
make me
biggest
cry.
choice.
I love it.
Oh, thanks. Uh, Hopefully I didn't make my parents cry if they're watching this.
Yeah.
But
Just
my
make him
wife
watch
is
this bit. They'll put more in
exactly
their in your inheritance. I'm just being
my
cynical.
my wife is the other person that
Oh,
has
that's
influenced me. But I'm not saying that because yeah, she's my wife and
yeah.
she's amazing. She's all those things.
Yeah.
But the truth is that, you really do see the difference, right? People who chose well and
Yes.
have that lock sync attitude with their partner and build a family, build a life, give you the ability to go out and take risks and do things while
Yeah.
counterbalancing you in other ways.
Yeah.
Like all of that is like this is all impossible if
Yeah.
if it's not solid there.
Wow,
So
that's a great answer. It's funny. I'm not surprised by your answer, but I also am. But I think they're great answers, you know. I mean, I've known you a long time, and I know you have a lot of respect for your family and your parents, and I know you have a really good relationship too. And I have a really good relationship as well. And I think for me, I probably forget sometimes how important that is in being able to do what you do. I don't think I could have left global back then and take the risk that I did had I not gotten the encouragement from my partner, who is my, she's my
course.
partner, my
Or
wife.
or encouragement and support, right? Like,
Yeah,
because if it didn't work
yeah,
out, like my, my wife, she's worked and she never wants to stop working as,
yeah,
as a professional. So, the ability for her to want to work
yeah,
while I'm able to take risks that, what I'm doing now, it can go to zero in a couple
yep,
of months from now. And if it does, I know that I've got a partner who's got my
yep,
back, and that's the same kind of thing you have like with the right co-founder or early stage partners
yeah.
that come into a new company.
Yeah, yeah, great. Well, look, it's a great way to end the podcast. Thanks so much, Ben. This is like the first series, but I find it's been very successful. I think I know a lot about you, and my fear in this podcast was, will I be able to convey or get Ben to convey the things that I find really interesting? Will I be able to ask the right questions? And I think it was very successful. So thanks to the listeners.
Thank
Thanks
you.
to you, Ben. Uh, you know, Listen to future podcasts. Go find out about Ben. He runs a great company, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Paul.